Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Thursday, July 31st, and this week, Lyft gets a bus, Uber loses in court, and workers get targeted. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Brian Greening. Brian, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. It's nice to be a day early here. It seems like we're celebrating by coming in earlier this week.
It's like a long weekend or a short week, is that, as they say, right? In the corporate world, corporate speak.
You know what? Are we in the corporate world? I think so.
I think we are. I mean, we are a law firm, so that would probably be the corporate world. So we do have some really fun stories this week. Some that are a little bit tongue twisty, but we'll get to that. But we're going to start off with the first story this week, and it involves Lyft, and they are getting an autonomous shuttle. Now, this is from TechCrunch, and they reported, quote, Lyft will add autonomous shuttles made by Australian manufacturer Bentler Group to its network in late 2026. The shuttles will be deployed in partnership with U.S. cities and airports, according to Lyft, but could expand out from there if things go well. The partnership will let Lyft use urban electric shuttles made by this company under the Holland brand. The shuttles will not have a steering wheel or pedals and will feature inward-facing seats for up to 9 seated and 6 standing passengers. We talked about this before, Brian. They're really just reinventing public transportation at this point. But it looks like Lyft is now trying to get into the shuttle game, if you will, bus game.
Yeah. There's a lot of different things to talk about in this story. It seems like a pretty simple story just from the headline, but we're talking about autonomous vehicles. We're talking about Lyft stepping on public transportation's toes. And we're also talking about the fact that these buses may take away rides from actual rideshare drivers. So this is actually a pretty big story. It shows that Lyft is trying to not get left behind the times in the autonomous vehicle world. For the longest time, it seemed like all we were hearing about was Uber and their attempts to keep up with Waymo and all that. And now we see Lyft dipping their toe in the water. But I'm actually more concerned about the impact that this is going to have on drivers more than anything. The airport is such a vital place for rideshare drivers. That's where a lot of the work stems from, a lot of the best fares. So if there's any sort of disruption in the airport work, I think that could have a huge effect on drivers' ability to earn the wages that they're used to and ultimately a living wage. So we'll see how this blossoms and whether passengers really take to the idea of this shuttle service. But I got to think they will, because I think the rides are going to be cheaper. It may be efficient in terms of getting people from airports to big city hubs. Like I can imagine in Chicago, if there's a bus that'll take you from O'Hare to Wrigleyville, and you can do that for cheap and efficiently, I think it would be enticing to the passengers. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm concerned about the effects this is going to have on drivers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't really dig that deep into that. My brain first, of course, went to the autonomous side and the personal injury side. We didn't mention this week on the show or on This Week in Rideshare articles, but Waymo, kind of barreled through again through an area where people were working, and it's bad enough if an AV vehicle loses control, but imagine a bus with let's say 15 people in it. I've never heard of this company that's made these electric shuttles. Maybe they're really great. I haven't heard of them. I mean, from what it says in this article, there's no sort of emergency stop. There's no pedals. There's no wheel. So it's going to do whatever it's going to do when it's on the road. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. Hopefully the technology is there. We've said time and time again that we don't think it's ready, but hopefully it's here for this one, because as you just referenced, a bus is a lot different than a car, and cars are dangerous enough, but this could be really scary in high populated, high traffic areas. So we better hope it works.
Yeah, we will find out. Hopefully the next article isn't about this thing going through a building, but we'll see. Our next story, involves Uber in UK, and yet again they lose in UK court. And this is from Reuters, and they reported, quote, Uber's rival taxi operators in England and Wales will not face a 20% VAT charge on their profit margins outside of London after the ride-hailing firm lost its appeal on Tuesday against a previous ruling. Excuse me, as the ambulance flies by the studio. Uber had sought a declaration that rival private hire taxi operators enter in a contract with passengers, meaning that operators must charge a 20% value-added tax, also known as a VAT, outside London, as Uber is required to do. Uber then complained and brought an appeal to the Supreme Court, which on Tuesday dismissed the appeal, ruling that operators are not required to enter into contract with the passengers. Now, this is a lot of legal jargon. It's a little technical, but Brian, as the expert here in all things legal, can you break it down for us what this means, just in general, for Uber and the passengers in the UK?
Yeah, so this is a loss for Uber and a win for the smaller taxi companies. Ultimately, Uber was saying that it has to pay this extra tax. It has a 20% value-added tax that it needs to pay, and its rivals, these smaller companies, don't have to pay it. That allows these companies to, one, perhaps make more profit, and two, keep fares cheaper for their riders, because if they don't have this additional charge, then there's nothing to pass on. This decision preserves that the cheaper fares are going to stay in place for Uber's rivals. And it really hits to the heart of Uber's business model. So ultimately, Uber enters into contracts with riders every time that you sign the terms of service. And frankly, every time you request a ride through the app, you're agreeing to a contract with the firm. And that business model is placing Uber in a position where they're subject to this value-added tax of 20%. Uber's rivals, the court said, don't have that same business model. They don't enter into those same agreements with their passengers, and therefore they're not subject to this charge. So that's a long way of saying that the business model that you choose, the business structure that you choose, can subject you to different rules, regulations, taxes, and in this particular case, Uber's on the short side of the stick based on what they chose. Now, I will just briefly say Uber gets a lot of other benefits based on its business model, like they don't have to pay employment taxes, they don't have to provide employee benefits, things of that nature. So Uber's chosen its structure for a very specific and strategic way, but in this particular case, that 20% tax is being levied against Uber and not against other taxi firms.
Yeah, Uber takes another L in the UK. But yeah, it is interesting. The UK laws are obviously they're pretty intense, and it seems quite complicated. But as you pointed out, Uber has done a pretty good job of weaving through it. But it does appear, because we talk about this a lot, especially with the UK, they can't slip through the cracks as easily in the UK as the US. There seems to be always something to catch them. And obviously, as you pointed out, this is basically Uber saying, "Hey, that's not fair. Make them pay the tax. I'm paying the 20% VAT. The 20% VAT." And the UK's said no, it's you, and you don't have to. These smaller firms don't have to do it. So it's interesting. It obviously doesn't operate like that here, but it's interesting to see in one country at least. Eventually, Uber has to pay up. It just has to in one way or the other. But as you pointed out, they still bypass a lot of the other rules and regulations.
Yeah. One thing that I think does carry over is that Uber whines when it loses and keeps its mouth shut when it wins. So we've seen situations before where Uber has not been regulated in the United States and its rivals have been, and you don't really hear Uber whining then. So,
Nope. Right.
I think their game plan and playbook are the same.
True, they're always still yelling, "It's not fair." It doesn't matter what's not fair. Something is just not fair for Uber. That's the
Right.
name of the game.
Right.
And we're going to end our final story here. Uber says that their immigrant workers are being targeted. This is from Bloomberg, and they reported, quote, Uber is pushing back on a new New York City proposal requiring delivery app workers to display company-issued ID numbers on reflective vests, saying it singles out immigrant workers for heightened surveillance and control. The new requirements would expose its delivery couriers, which include 35,000 immigrant workers, to, quote, police scrutiny, even in the absence of any violation. This is what Josh Gold said, an Uber spokesperson, who added that the administration did not engage with the company on the proposal. The company will engage on the rules moving forward, he said. So this is interesting. I actually kind of sided with Uber on this one. It would target immigrant workers pretty aggressively, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Brian.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, certainly we can see the intent of the law being beneficial, that having some sort of identification, having a safety vest that might be reflective, so that when you're out at night, you could see all sorts of ways that this would be beneficial. But in practice, in the current environment where a lot of delivery workers are immigrants, having them be identified as delivery workers certainly could put them at risk for the current immigration task and task force that the federal government has out there. In the same way that we see like ICE is spending time at Home Depot, I can also see ICE looking for people who are wearing these vests and perhaps profiling. So it does put a target on their back, and I certainly understand why the company wants to protect its workers and why the workers themselves may be hesitant to display any sort of identification in that way. In any situation, there are unintended consequences with laws that are passed, and oftentimes it takes hearing from the people who are going to be affected by those laws to fully grasp what those unintended consequences are or may be. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So I can't really, weigh in on what's the right move politically, but I can certainly see the implications legally for people in this field, being forced to identify themselves. I get it.
Yeah, and it actually makes me think not even just of police scrutiny, but we just did a story about this a couple of weeks ago where Uber, delivery drivers are getting targeted in general for robberies, assaults. And so you're really sticking out then with this sort of vest, which is already, again, a problem. And again, they've kind of always, delivery workers in general have always been on the front lines of dealing with things. They dealt with the COVID pandemic, they dealt with the tip baiting. Now they're dealing with the scrutiny. So you're right. I don't know exactly what the right answer is. It seemed like it was the idea here made sense on paper, but once you start getting into it and the people that it would affect, it can get messy really quick. And I don't know what the official proposal is going to be. If they're going to say yes to this, but it sounds like either way, Uber said they'll comply. I just don't think they're very happy about it.
Yeah, Uber's going to have to do what the law requires, but ultimately, I think that it does sound to me like in this particular case, Uber is stepping up for its workers and saying this is a bad policy for the people who are doing work on our behalf, and it may be self-serving. They may be concerned that if people need to identify themselves, there'll be fewer people willing to take these orders. They might find other jobs where they don't have to do it. Certainly, Uber has an interest in keeping its workforce on the streets. But whatever their reason is, I understand why the workers would be hesitant. And I appreciate that Uber is stepping up on their behalf, because a lot of these individuals don't have a voice to really speak up for themselves. Yeah,
well said. Okay, so that is the stories for this week. And as always, Brian, I will give you the final say before we head into, for me, the weekend. You still have tomorrow, but for the weekend.
For the weekend for one of us. So before we head into Jared's long weekend, we remind everybody that LegalRideshare is always available for free consultations. We assist drivers, passengers, victims, anybody who's been injured in a rideshare related event. So car accidents, assaults, batteries, you name it, we can help you recover medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and any other damage that you sustain. All of our contact information is on our website, legalrideshare.com. And you can actually message us right through the website. So that's a great way to get in touch.
Great. Thank you, Bryant. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.